Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, we'll let you hear some sound bites from head coach Josh Mcdaniels as he met with the media on Monday, plus a nice little feather in the cap for Raiders wide receiver Davante Adams. Coming up in segment number 2, Luke Robinson, host of Locked On Bama. He joined my radio show on Monday to talk all things Josh Jacobs. You'll hear that conversation, plus calls and texts will close out the show. It's all coming up on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, November 22nd, 2022.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the show free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. My guy Ari is doing a fantastic job making sure it's up each and every day on YouTube and trying to improve it each and every day. So hats off to my guy Ari. You can follow him on Twitter at Ari Produces, or shoot him a tweet and be like, hey, you did this good, or hey, you know what? Tell Q to do this because he's not doing it right. It's all good. Hit him up. He'll definitely pass on the message, and we definitely appreciate you checking out the show. Today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast is presented by Prize Picks. As daily fantasy made easy, you pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Now, I want to go ahead and jump right into some head coach Josh Mcdaniels sound from Monday. Met with him at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. Pushed it back a little bit. Normally, it was supposed to be at 10:30 in the morning. Instead, they pushed it back to 11:30. But either way you look at it, we were able to get that conversation in. And there was only a few of us there at the media session because everyone was traveling back from Denver. Again, I didn't make the trip to Denver, so I was right here in the Las Vegas area. Not a big deal. I made my way over there to Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. Paul Gutierrez was there. Sam Gordon was there. A couple others were there, and that was about it. But just got a couple sound bites that I want you to hear from what head coach Josh Mcdaniels had to say on Monday. Again, we'll get to talk to him on Wednesday, and I think we're going to get to talk to him on Friday as well before they take off for Seattle. But here was his opening statement, just kind of recapping the game and the 22-16 victory over the Denver Broncos.
Well, good to come in after a win and talk about watching the film and some of the things that we see after a game like yesterday. Again, like I said after the game, proud of the effort of our team. You know, obviously I had to play 4 quarters and then some to get it done. And anytime you win on the road in your division, it's not an easy thing to do. And it's a good team, and they do a lot of things to make things difficult on you. I thought we really showed up and played one of our better games in a kicking game all year. I know Daniel missed the one kick, but kicked off very well, gave our coverage units an opportunity to cover inside the 20, which we made a bunch of tackles inside the 20-yard line. AJ pinned him inside the 10 on his first punt, which I thought was, it was a good situational play there to put him on a long field. Amir had some returns there in the kickoff return game that I thought were, helpful in terms of putting us in good field position to start our drives. So I was pleased with, got a lot of young guys out there playing big roles in the kicking game, and I thought they showed up and did some good things. And defensively, we gave up the first drive, and then really I thought we kind of, we settled down and kind of got into the game, holding them to 9 points the rest of the game and made some key plays when we needed to, some key stops. We kind of made some adjustments. Pat and his staff did a good job of making some adjustments on some things that hurt us early in the game. And our guys were able to do that and make the changes on the fly. And offensively, hung in there. Thought we missed a few opportunities, but, ran it enough. JJ pounded out over 100 yards again, and guys, we had the change on the offensive line there and thought they represented themselves fairly well. We got the 1 sack, and Derek got the ball out of his hands for the most part, and then we're able to make, enough plays there in the 2-minute at the very end to tie it, and then, made a few crucial plays there at the end to win it. So, again, always good to win. even better when it's in the division on the road.
So there was the opening statement right there from head coach Josh McDaniels. Pretty lengthy, statement about the game, just kind of recapping all elements of it, offensively, defensively, special teams. So you heard him talk about the kicking game and Daniel Carlson. So immediately I jumped in, and you'll hear the question. I'm actually going to leave the question on there because he actually cut me off, not in a disrespectful way, but he knew that the question was coming. And I mentioned it on Monday's podcast. I was going to ask him about that very first possession, not rolling Daniel Carlson out there to kick the 55-yard field goal, instead of having A.J. Cole punt the ball and try to pin Denver back, which they did a good job. I mean, Denver had to go 93 yards to get a touchdown. They did that. But I still, and I said it on Monday's show, I thought that it was a bad decision when Carlson has the leg to put it through the upright. So I thought that, they should just go for the points. But he knew what question was coming. I asked it immediately. Here's the question and head coach Josh McDaniels' answer.
Was it just a field position thing? You mentioned the first drive.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, we know he could try it from there. I just was weighing the pros and cons of, for some reason we don't make it, which I know I'm probably as guilty of anything of when he sent him out there. It's like we're thinking it's automatic. But I just was thinking, okay, 56, 57-yarder right off the bat. If for some reason we miss it, then they got the ball at midfield to start the game. And, I thought A.J. punted it where we wanted him to punt it. So, you're hoping to play the percentages there. And, it's hard to drive the ball 93 yards in the NFL. And unfortunately, they did. But, that was the thinking.
So there it was. Again, nothing disrespectful on his point. He just knew exactly what was coming. So he was able just to, just go ahead and cut it off at the pass and just be like, hey, look, that was what it was. It was all about position. Didn't want them to have a great field position early in the game if, in fact, Daniel Carlson missed. And look, I totally understand that. I mean, sometimes you just play the field position game and you live with it. Now, who thought that Denver was going to travel 93 yards on their opening drive when they don't ever score on their first drive of the game? But they did. And to the Raiders' defensive credit, they were able to make adjustments after giving up 10 early points. Didn't allow them to get in the end zone anymore the rest of the game. Only gave up 6 points in the second half. So I understand what he was doing. I still think that they should have let Daniel Carlson kick that field goal. But, remember, not Daniel Carlson, Josh McDaniels is learning this team as well. He's learning what works for this team and what doesn't work for this team. And Daniel Carlson works for this team. So, I would not be shocked to see Josh McDaniels roll him out there more often than not, especially now that he knows, hey, man, the dude just put a 57-yarder through the uprights. He can do it more times than not. But we'll see what happens. But, again, I want to give Coach McDaniels a little bit of credit that, he is still learning this team moving forward. Now, I also asked about Max Crosby and that block, that field goal block. And look, Max Crosby did everything, especially right before halftime. Punched the ball out of Melvin Gordon's hands. And, oh, by the way, Melvin Gordon got released on Monday. So the Raiders got him fired on his day off, basically, right? Not trying to make a joke about it, but basically got him fired on his day off. He got waived after that fumble. He's put the ball on the ground multiple times, but Crosby knocked out the ball, made him fumble, also blocked the field goal. And I do think that was probably the biggest play of the game, stopping Denver from getting onto the board, but also giving some juice to the sideline, giving some juice to even Coach McDaniels. He fist bumped, and I asked him that. I talked about that on Monday. I said, hey, man, you don't show a lot of emotion on the sideline. Even you were pretty pumped up when that play happened. How big, how massive was that for you and your team?
We've talked about that a lot, Q. Like, we work on that every week, and literally we work on the actual act of blocking them. Now the punter and kicker don't like to do it because they get the ball, but we actually go through it because it's different than you think. Like the first time we started doing it in practice, the guys will close their eyes and look away like something's going to hit them in the face. They got a helmet on and so they've actually now gotten more comfortable doing the drills, and we've talked a lot about it. Like, I'm not sure there's a play in football that creates that kind of energy. When you block a punt, when you block a field goal, I mean, it's like a complete shift in the momentum. You know what I mean? And we know how big of a play it is. And if you actually get a punt block, you know what I mean? Like, that's a huge one because now you have a chance to score. So I think our team has completely bought into, the effort that we need on those plays because it's not easy to get them. It isn't. I mean, there's not that many blocked every week in the National Football League, but if you can get one, man, does it change the game? And I think our sideline actually reacted that way because we've actually talked about it. Like, if we get one of these, like, you're going to see it on the sideline. And it did. We had some energy at halftime because I think that swing was important to us.
So there you go. There's head coach Josh McDaniels just talking about Max Crosby and how big of a play that was. And, on Monday on my radio show, I had Judd Thrash, head coach Judd Thrash. He's of Monterey High School in Lubbock, Texas. He actually coached Max Crosby at Colleyville Heritage. He was his defensive coordinator, and so was able to talk all things Max Crosby, even back in high school, and kind of what he saw from him. And I thought about putting it on the show today, but I really wanted to get Luke Robinson's thoughts on Josh Jacobs. So you'll hear that in segment number 2. Maybe tomorrow I'll have Coach Thrash's comments and his conversation that we had with him on Max Crosby. Maybe I'll put that on the show then, or at least a couple sound bites from it. But yeah, there was some good stuff right there from Coach McDaniels talking about Crosby and what he brought to the table with that blocked field goal right before halftime. And the final soundbite I have for you from head coach Josh McDaniels has to do with Josh Jacobs and what he brings to the table, and especially with Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow both out. He was obviously a key cog on Sunday, and he's been a key cog all season long. So here's head coach Josh McDaniels just talking about what Josh Jacobs means to the team and what he's going to mean to the team moving forward.
He's very valuable. He's a really good player, and in every aspect. And I have said this before, but to me, one of the most impressive things about him is he never asks to come out of the game. And I've coached for a while, and that's a tough position to play and never come out. Because you're getting hit a lot and you get banged around and guys are falling on you and all the rest of it. And he's got this incredible football endurance about him, and he runs in there, he takes a bunch of hits, he doesn't even look to the sideline. And it took me a few weeks to get used to that, because you're normally thinking like you're going to be subbing backs quite honestly pretty regularly. And I'm used to that from my recent past where we used a lot of different backs, but this guy just gives you such a high level of confidence in him, and never appears to be winded or tired. And honestly, I think it's better as the game goes on. So we're really fortunate to have this guy. He's a really good football player.
So glowing reviews right there from head coach Josh McDaniels. And, we said it multiple times before the season started that this offense was going to be running back by committee. And you could tell by that answer right there from Coach McDaniels. That's what the plan was originally. But Josh Jacobs changed that plan. And they also declined his 5th-year option. Maybe that plan has changed too. Maybe they thought they were going to let him go after the season. But what he's been able to do, he has 930 yards rushing. The second highest rusher for the Raiders is Derek Carr with 67 yards. Think about that. He has 930 yards rushing. Derek Carr has 67. That's the gap between first and second as far as rushing goes with the Raiders. It's been all Josh Jacobs or nothing. I could definitely appreciate that. And so hopefully, I really am rooting for Josh Jacobs to stick around with the Silver and Black. I think that they need him to stick around. And I think that maybe what he's been able to do this season has really kind of showed and opened up the eyes of Dave Ziegler, Champ Kelly, Josh McDaniels, and let them know what that man brings to the table, what he means to the Silver and Black. So you'll hear more about Josh Jacobs coming up in segment number 2. Before I get to that, though, I did want to pass along this little nugget about Davante Adams. I got this from NFL Communications. They always send over some facts for the week, and I thought that this was pretty cool. Following week 11 of the NFL season, said Raiders wide receiver Davante Adams recorded 7 receptions for 141 yards and 2 TDs, including the 35-yard game-winning touchdown catch in overtime of the Raiders' 22-16 comeback victory in Denver. Adams has 3 career overtime touchdowns, tied with Pro Football Hall of Famer LaDainian Tomlinson for the most overtime touchdowns in NFL history. Adams, who has 10 touchdown receptions this season, is the 4th player in NFL history with at least 10 touchdown receptions in at least 6 of his first 9 seasons, joining Pro Football Hall of Famers Jerry Rice with 7 seasons, and Marvin Harrison with 6, and Randy Moss with 6. So nice little nugget, nice little facts right there, fun facts about Davante Adams, who's having a hell of a season. I mentioned the 930 yards that Josh Jacobs has. Davante Adams has 925 yards and 10 touchdowns on the season for the Silver and Black. So I thought that I know it's not the loudest season, and of course with the lack of wins that the Raiders have picked up, it's going to go a little bit under the radar. But Davante Adams is balling out in his first year with the Silver and Black, and I do think it's just going to get better and better and better. So that's what I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, kind of news and notes of the day. Coming up in segment number 2, Luke Robinson, host of Locked On Bama. He'll join the show to talk all things Josh Jacobs. This is a conversation I had on my radio show on Monday. You'll hear that conversation coming up after I tell you about a couple great sponsors here on the show, including Turo. And I'm sure you're probably wondering right now, Q, what is Turo? Well, you know what? Turo is something that can come in handy this holiday season. It's the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community, a local host. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the U.S., UK, Canada, and even coming soon to Australia. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday weekend. Maybe you're going to get away and you want to drive someone else's car. Turo can help. Find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just need to get from A to B. Test drive that new electrical vehicle you had your eye on, see how it fits your everyday lifestyle. And many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Please, all you got to do is check out Turo. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars. And again, drive your car. Check out your car at Turo.com. I also want to tell you about Prize Picks. And Prize Picks, you pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. And the thing about it is you're not competing against anybody. With Prize Picks, it's just you versus projections, and that is it. They offer projections on any sport that you watch: NFL, NBA, NHL, PGA, college hoops, women's college hoops. It doesn't really matter. They've got you covered. Check them out today. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. Safe and fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. What do you need to do to play? Well, download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com, sign up, and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. You deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget, use the promo code Locked On at sign up for instant deposit match up to $100. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to let you hear a conversation I had on my radio show on Monday about running back Josh Jacobs. Had Luke Robinson, host of Locked On Bama, on the show. I really did an appreciation show on my radio show. Talked all things Davante Adams and Derek Carr with George Takata, longtime sportscaster in the 559. Talked to Coach Judd Thrash. He's a head coach there in Texas. He coached Max Crosby at Colleyville Heritage, his high school. And then, as I mentioned, Luke Robinson, host of Locked On Bama. He joined the show to talk all things Josh Jacobs and really just started off the conversation talking about Jacobs on the season. 930 yards rushing, 7 TDs, 251 yards receiving, tied for third on the team with Foster Moreau, and just really started off with him just saying, hey, man, I know you're observing from a distance. How impressed are you by the season that Josh Jacobs is having?
I'm just, first of all, thanks for having me, but I'm just so happy for him. Just a great guy. I mean, a really great guy. And at Alabama, he really was beloved. He was sort of, the hard hat mentality. I mean, yeah, he's uber talented, but at the same time, I mean, he's not scared to get in there and do any of the dirty stuff. We used him in a wildcat position a lot of times. In the SEC championship game in 2018, we used him in the wildcat a couple of times to get some really big first downs. He's just the kind of guy that everybody would want to have on the team. I was a little shocked that the Raiders didn't want to pick up that option, but I think it's worked out for Josh because he's having a heck of a year now for the Raiders.
Yeah, no, he really is. And how much of them not picking up that option do you think kind of motivated and pushed him? Because, look, make no mistake about it, Josh Jacobs is a guy that's had a lot of adversity in his life, and it seems like every time adversity hits him, he hits back just a little bit harder.
That's a great point, and I think that's so true. I mean, everybody probably knows there he was homeless at one time, living out of his car, and he was not this 5-star recruit everybody was salivating over. He was sort of a 3-star board, and he turned out, I think, to end up being a 4-star type guy. I'm a big recruiting freak. I mean, I just love you're keeping up with the stars. Mm-hmm. And I think he started out as a 3-star and then moved up a little bit to a 4-star. And I'm usually not one to get wowed. A lot of people love to call 3-stars, they see their film and they're like, well, he plays like a 5-star. He has a 5-star heart. And I think they do that way too much. But when I watched Josh Jacobs' film, I said, I don't care what he's ranked. I mean, just watch this kid. It's not that he's so much faster than everybody. There was something about him. It was an it factor. Yeah. And I'm thankful that Alabama ended up getting him. I mean, they went kind of at the last minute. And I got to hear the story about it, how one of the coaches was like, look, I really want to offer this guy. And Saban sort of put it on him like, okay, this is kind of on you if he doesn't work out, but let's take him. And because Alabama, is not one to take guys that Saban's not super fired up about or that don't camp at Alabama. So for Alabama to take a shot at him tells you exactly how much some of the coaches thought about Josh Jacobs. And it worked out really well. I mean, he was fantastic here, and he had a monster career. And I think he's doing great things with the Raiders. He's having a better pro career statistically than he did in college.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he really is. Again, we're talking with Luke Robinson, host of Locked On Bama. And, hey, Luke, no pressure, right? Nick Saban says, hey, okay, go ahead and get it. This is on you, though, if he doesn't work out. No pressure there, right?
Yeah, no pressure. And I mean, but I think sometimes these coaches know, a lot of them were like, hey, coaching on the Alabama staff can be somewhat of a golden ticket. If you get on the Alabama staff, there's a good chance you're going to get swiped up and get a big payday from somewhere else very, very soon. So I think some of these coaches are like, yeah, I'll take this chance because next year I'm going to be making a bunch of money somewhere else anyway.
Right, no doubt about it. Again, we're talking with Luke Robinson, host of Locked On Bama here on Raider Nation Radio 920, Unnecessary Roughness. I was just talking before you came on about how I felt like the Raiders were real fortunate because they got Josh, and he wasn't your typical running back at Alabama where they get carry on top of carry on top of carry. I felt like he was used sparingly, used enough to see how good he could be, but he wasn't used to the point where it's like, man, I don't know if he's got enough, tread left on the tire. They got him in a really good spot. What'd you think about that?
And I hear what you're saying, and I think from afar, a lot of people believe that Alabama sort of runs some of their running backs into the ground. I certainly understand the thought process, but the only time that was ever really true, two times, I guess, Mark Ingram in his Heisman Trophy year, and, I mean, Alabama needed him badly at that time.
Yeah,
I mean, Greg McElroy, God bless him, was not the quarterbacks that ended up coming to Alabama later, like Tua or Bryce Young now or Mac Jones. But then, of course, Derrick Henry's year. But Derrick Henry was such a freak of nature. I think we're seeing now the Titans are giving it to him every time, and they're stupid not to.
Right.
So, those were only two guys. When Josh was at Alabama, there was also Bo Scarborough, who has spent some time in the NFL. And I'm going to tell you something. If he hadn't broken his leg in the national championship game, Alabama would have clearly won in 2016, and he would probably still be having a great pro career. I think that sort of derailed him a little bit. And Damian Harris was also in that backfield.
Yep.
So, I mean, he had some other dudes he was splitting some time with. He never even got close to 1,000 yards rushing at Alabama. One year, I think he got almost 900 total scrimmage yards. And, boy, in that game yesterday against Denver, didn't he make a huge catch to get I always say that now, the Vegas Raiders down to field goal position.
Yeah, no, he really did. And, it's funny, Luke, because that's one of the things that people questioned when he came out of college is his receiving ability. And I was like, I watched Alabama a lot, and he was able to catch the rock a lot. I mean, I'm not surprised that he has success through the year. Are you ever surprised that he's a good receiver as well?
No, I would beg people, if you really are a Josh Jacobs fan, then I would say go to YouTube, check out Alabama-Auburn, the Iron Bowl 2018. He makes an unbelievable catch against Auburn where he's turned one way, he has to turn around to make the catch, and then runs over and runs by a couple of other Tiger defenders. And then, of course, he catches a little flare pass from Tua that year against Oklahoma and just trucks a defender. He loves catching the ball, and he's really, really good at it. He's not a bad return guy, but I don't think the Raiders need to put him in that position. But,
no.
Yeah, he's a great receiver.
Yeah, that's what I always thought as well. Again, we're talking with Luke Robinson here on Raider Nation Radio 920 Unnecessary Roughness. Luke is the host of Locked On Bama. My man Damon's got one for you.
Yeah, I just want to further add on to about the stacked backfield that was at Alabama. In 2017, Damian Harris rushed for 1,000 yards. The second leading rusher was Jalen Hurts at 855, Bo Scarborough, Najee Harris, Josh Jacobs, and Brian Robinson, who's now on the Washington Commanders. With all of that talent rushing out of the backfield, did you ever think that, hey, Josh Jacobs, he's going to be one of the ones, first-round draft pick to make an impact in the NFL? Or do you guys down there in Bama just think that every running back is going to make an impact in the NFL?
Yeah, we can be arrogant like that. There's no doubt. But, I think that I'll tell you, I've been a Jacobs fan. Look, I always kind of felt like Najee would end up being the one. And I still think he hasn't really found his total footing in Pittsburgh yet. Some of that may be due to the fact that, they're breaking in a new quarterback and all that stuff. But I always thought Najee Harris was going to be the one. Damian Harris is the one who's kind of surprised me to have such a great pro career that's just been hanging around with New England and just doing workmanlike effort because he was notorious at Alabama for having these long runs and always getting run down inside the 5-yard line. I always felt so bad for him. He could never finish off the run. And then, of course, Brian Robinson's doing nice, but Brian Robinson is not a breakaway threat. I think the one guy out of that whole group that it probably is the most universal, is Josh Jacobs. Now, Najee's, a little more powerful, maybe a little more athletic, But Josh Jacobs is faster. Josh Jacobs will get the tough yards. Josh Jacobs is probably the better receiver, even though both of them are very good at it. Josh Jacobs, I was such a big fan of his that I thought he would end up being the second best of that group. I thought Najee would be first, but I think Josh is going to end up having the best pro career. There's no doubt about it. He got over, 4,000 rushing yards for y'all so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's got 930 this year already through 10 games. I mean, the dude is playing out of his mind. I'm so happy for him. Like you said, you're a fan of him. I'm such a big fan of his as well. I met him for the first time in Nashville right before he was drafted, and he's just a humble dude. He's a humble, but he's hungry, right? And he's just it's something I can really respect. As far as what you've been able to see from Josh, not only on the field, but just grown as a man and a leader, how much have you seen from Josh?
Oh, look, he's the kind of guy that I think when you grow up in those circumstances, you're going to go one of two ways. You're going to either be very humble and hungry like he has turned out, or you're going to be extraordinarily rude and mad at the world all the time. And I think those are the two paths you can take, because you're so bitter about your circumstances, or you're like, hey, I'm going to change this and make sure my family and friends never have to go through this again. And Josh has took that other path, and he's just a hard worker. He loves playing the game of football. I mean, but he understands his place. He's not, like I said, he's not going to be the kind of guy that gets mad if he doesn't get the ball enough. None of that stuff. In fact, I was worried. I think a lot of players would have probably been a little more upset in a bad way, and if they hadn't picked up that option, or maybe felt like they weren't getting enough love. And he has really used that, like you said, like a motivational factor, and not in an antagonistic way. I think he's done it in a way that is really going to help Vegas, and it's going to help him too. And I hope he ends up staying there. Man, I think about it all the time. The Raiders had this affinity for Alabama players. They drafted Amari Cooper. They drafted Leatherwood, who's now with the Bears. I'm sorry that didn't work out. But and then, of course, they got Jacobs. They also had Kenyon Drake for a while. I was really hoping – how much fun would it be for me over here in Alabama watching NFL Sunday Ticket like I do every Sunday, and seeing the Raiders have Drake, Jacobs, and Amari Cooper as your weapon? I certainly think you'd have a few more wins.
No doubt.
All right, something that I want to ask you about. You mentioned Josh Jacobs being a 3-star recruit, and I just mentioned all the names that were in that backfield at the same time. What did it take to be on the field in Alabama? Because everyone's going to be a high-level recruit, but what kind of work did they have to put on the practice field to get on the playing field?
I think that particular signing class with Najee Harris, with Brian Robinson, with Tua, with Devontae Smith, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy.
Yep.
I mean, that class was just ridiculously sick. And they had, I think Leatherwood was in that class too. I mean, just an unbelievable class. And, Alabama puts these, number one classes together on top of one another. And around here, because we have some of our rivals like Auburn or maybe Tennessee, they always go like, I don't understand why kids want to go there and sit the bench. And I said, no, what you don't understand is Alabama usually plays as many freshmen as anybody in the country, because what Alabama does is say, look, we're going to play whoever is going to come in here and work the hardest. And sometimes that is a freshman. That particular class, of course, went on to win a national championship in 2017, very famously to Devontae Smith for the 2nd and 26 touchdown.
Yeah.
And, Saban's not scared to play freshmen, and that works a lot. And I think kids now realize, hey, like you said about tread on the tires, I don't want to go somewhere and be the only running back, and get my knees shot and my ankles broken and all those things and be worn out by the time I get to the league. I want to go somewhere that we divvy it up a little bit. Yeah, I'd love to be a star. I'd also love to win titles, and I'd also love to go to practice every day, where practice is as hard as it's going to be at game time. And it works out well for Alabama to have that selling point.
Luke, as we wrap this up, I wanted to ask you, we know Will Anderson, we know Bryce Young. Those are going to be two of the big-time names that are going to most likely be into the draft this upcoming year. I know Bryce Young hasn't made his intentions known yet, but I think that we all know and see the writing on the wall. He's going to the league. Who should we be on the lookout for? Who's the next star? Who's the next one from the Crimson Tide to be on the lookout for?
Well, if you are going to be watching the Iron Bowl this week, I'm going to be there. I'm looking forward to it.
Nice.
I think Brian Branch is one that he'll probably be coming out too. He's a junior, but he'll be coming out of the defensive backfield. And I'll tell you, Jahmyr Gibbs, who transferred over from Georgia Tech, he is awesome. I mean, he is the perfect pro back. He's not as tough in the middle as Josh Jacobs, but he's a lot faster, and he is incredibly dynamic. I think he's going to make a perfect running back in the NFL. And I wanted to say one other thing about Henry Ruggs. Let me tell you something. He's from Montgomery, which isn't far from my hometown. And I don't know what kind of rap he's got there, and I know what happened was just awful and tragic, and it's just sad.
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you something. He's a good guy that made a really bad mistake, and I hope people understand that. He really is a good guy.
There is my conversation right there with Luke Robinson, good dude, host of Locked On Bama, does a fantastic job covering the Crimson Tide, and he's a guy that I talk to quite a bit. As you know, anyone who's listened to this show for a while knows I'm a big fan of the Crimson Tide. So a really good dude. I was so happy to have him actually on my show on Monday just to talk about it, and glad to be able to pass that conversation on so you can hear it here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before I get to any of that, though, do want to tell you about betonline.net, your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. Football, basketball, soccer, esports, they got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at betonline.net as well. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix on. Head to the website today using your laptop or your mobile device to learn about more. BetOnline.net. That is where the game starts. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Raider Jim in the Pacific Northwest. He's calling to talk about the contract of Derek Carr, his contract extension, and what he thinks of it moving forward. Here he is, Raider Jim in the Pacific Northwest.
Q and 702, it's Raider Jim from the Pacific Northwest. Thanksgiving's approaching. Just wanted to thank you, Q, and all of Raider Nation. I'm so thankful that I'm part of the greatest fandom in the earth, or on the earth, I should say, and just a great bunch of folk, and I'm very appreciative of that. However, I am not in a good state of mind. I sold my tickets to go see the Raiders this coming weekend. I live in Seattle, and I'm not going. I paid $700 for these tickets, and I sold them for $200. I just cannot endure more pain this year, Q. Instead, I'm just going to think about next year. And I don't know whether you're familiar with it, but Fitzgerald's Over the Cap podcast comes out once a week. And I wanted to highlight that because his podcast for last Friday explores some of the commercial salary issues at play in the NFL. At around 46 minutes, he goes into he discusses the Carr status and the contract implications for the Ziegler and company when it comes to Derek Carr's contract. Namely, Carr's contract extension earlier this year was akin to what Fitzgerald calls a contract for show. And the contract pays him $33 million on paper, but it's not guaranteed. He only actually gets injury protection, which is $32.9 million. However, it can become fully guaranteed only 5 days after the Super Bowl. So arguably, Carr gave them a discount, he says, of guarantees, but in return he got a no-trade clause. And Fitzgerald argues that, say the Raiders release Carr right now, he wouldn't get paid the same amount of money, he thinks, because he's damaged goods. In essence, it renders the no-trade clause virtually moot, and that is something to think about for the Raider Nation. Fitzgerald also points out that, Carr got actually a favorable vesting date, and because of those 5 days. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out. And I'm not going to go into all the details. If Raider Nation wants to listen to it, they can. But here's some of the quotes. He said, "It's hard to find a team that has had a worse season with regard to their off-season signings." And he says, "You are a disaster right now as a franchise." So that's something to think about. And he says, when it comes to the Carr contract too, take a look at what they're going to be doing in mid-December. Because in mid-December, if they bench him to protect themselves from the injury guarantee, that's probably what they're going to do. It'll be interesting to see what the Raiders front office is going to do as far as Carr's status going forward. Okay, this is Raider Jim from the Pacific Northwest. Raiders all day, every day.
Jim, thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. And yes, very appreciative of Raider Nation as well. Hopefully you have a happy Thanksgiving, the whole week, and the whole holiday season. And yeah, I know Carr's contract very well. I don't really have to listen to the podcast. I mean, I've looked at it, dissected it. I realized it was a very team-friendly deal. Now, of course, he has a lot of guaranteed money that can kick in after, like you mentioned, the 5th day following the Super Bowl. So the Raiders have some decisions to make. But my belief, and this is just my belief, he'll be with the Raiders in 2023. That'll be year 10. They'll draft a quarterback. They'll let him sit behind Carr until they're ready to move on. Carr, Adams, that is a duo. So if you make a decision on Carr, you're making a decision on Adams, in my opinion. Now, there's certain variables that could play into that, but right now in November is not the time to talk about those variables. So we can get to those when they come. But as far as I'm concerned, Carr and Adams are going to be a go in 2023 for the Silver and Black. Thank you so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Next up, got a text from Josh from the 386. Hey, Q, my gut feeling is telling me that the Raiders are going to cut Carr 5 days after the Super Bowl and sign Brady to a 1 to 2 year contract and draft one of the top quarterbacks with their first round pick. What's your opinion on this? Thanks for everything you do. Again, Josh from the 386. And similar to what I said to Raider Jim in the Pacific Northwest, I do believe that they draft a quarterback, but I believe that he sits behind Carr. I don't believe that he sits behind Tom Brady. I don't see that happening. I don't know where Tom Brady plays, if he plays next year, but I don't believe it's going to be in Las Vegas with the Silver and Black. So thank you so much for that text. I do appreciate you. Up next, I got a call from Michael in San Jose. He's calling to talk about the Daniel Carlson field goal attempt. I think Coach McDaniels should have allowed him to do it, but he didn't. That was the opening drive. Here's Michael in San Jose talking about it.
Hey, what's up, Q? This is Mike calling out of San Jose. And I just wanted to touch base a little bit on the decision not to let Carlson go out and kick that 55-yard field goal in the beginning of the game. I think it was it could have been a combination of both. I think it was really that they didn't want to risk Daniel Carlson's streak. I think they were only going to let him kick field goals, I guess closer field goals until he broke that streak, unless it was like a field goal they had to have, game-ending, something like that. Also, it could have been just, I don't know if it was windy out there, but it could have just been because of the field positioning. Had they missed, it would have put them in a bad spot. But I guess all for naught since they went 92 yards down the field anyways. But, yeah, that's just my little 2 cents. Anyways, Raiders up.
Michael, thanks so much for the call. And it was a field position thing. I mean, Coach said that on Monday when I asked him. You heard it in segment number 1. He didn't even let me get the rest of the question out. He knew it was coming. If they had held him out to try to keep their streak alive and sacrifice a chance to win, that would be all bad, in my opinion. So that's not what they did. They just thought that the field position meant more than trying to kick a field goal. They didn't want to give them really good field position just in case he missed. And he did miss a 46-yard field goal, so it's not like 55 yards is guaranteed, but I just think that for the sake of trying to score points and win a game, they should have rolled him out there. But I understand what he was thinking when he decided not to. So thank you so much for that. I do appreciate you. Got time for one more text. It's a very lengthy text from New York Old School Raider. Yo, Q, New York Old School Raider again. It's been a minute. I found myself in the ER after choking on the Kool-Aid I swallowed this summer. I was like, how can my team be this bad? Then I reflected on all the expert Vegas odds makers were saying, and even they didn't see us being this bad. But hold on, I didn't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. I, along with the rest of Raider Nation, helped, but put the banana there. How? And said, take the emotions out of last season, and we were a 10-7 team. Let's compare with the Bengals, who were also 10-7. Breakdown by record: dominant wins, single score losses, and dominant losses. Yeah, that's all in this text. Las Vegas, 3 dominant wins, 7 single score wins, 2 single score losses, and 5 dominant losses. Cincinnati, 7 dominant wins, 3 single score wins, 5 single score losses, and 2 dominant losses. The text goes on. If the odds makers see more than dominant losses and dominant wins in 2021, then they averaged out the single score wins and the single score losses. That's why many had us at 7-10, 8-9 football team, but we did not listen. There's a lot of math that he's got going on here. So far at 22, we are 2 dominant wins, 1 single score win, 6 single score losses, and 1 dominant loss. With the remainder of the 22 season, let's focus on how many dominant wins we can get this season. We have 2 this year. We only had 3 last year. We could have had a dominant win against Arizona, Kansas City, and Jacksonville. We blew big first half leads. Also, how many dominant losses we can avoid. This year, we only had 1. Last year was 5. My hope is we get to 5 to 6 dominant wins and only have 1 to 2 dominant losses this season. That'd be a sign of progress, even if our record is worse than it was in 2022. As always, just win, baby. Hold it. Nah, we got to change that to just dominant wins, baby. Again, that's from New York Old School Raider. That was a lot. That was a ton. That was a ton to unpack right there, but I understand the gist of it. There's a lot of math. There was a lot of analytics that went into that, and you know that I'm not a big analytic guy, but that was a lot to unpack. So I understand the gist of it. We'll see what the rest of the season holds for the Raiders. They got 7 more games. starting this week with Seattle. So we'll see what they do this week, and we'll see what they do moving forward, and how many dominant wins, dominant losses, single game wins, single score wins, single score losses that they have, all that formula that you threw out there. We'll see how it shakes out through the rest of the 7 games. So thank you so much for that. I do appreciate you. Thanks again for making the Locked On Raider podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the show free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Thanks to my man Ari at Ari Produces on Twitter. Again, Raider Nation, till tomorrow, we'll have more news and notes of the day. We'll have more conversation. I might bring that Judd Thrash conversation to the table as well, plus more calls and texts. It's all coming up on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family, and most importantly, as always, just win, baby.